Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Future of Jewish podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Hoffman. On this episode, I am joined by Yael Eckstein. She is the president and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, which was founded in 1983 by her father, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, of blessed memory. She oversees all ministry programs and serves as the international spokesperson. With over a decade of nonprofit experience in multiple roles, Eckstein has the rare distinction of being a woman leading one of the world's largest religious charitable organizations. She has also written 3 books. Enjoy my conversation with Yael Eckstein. Yael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. I've been following you for quite some time, from afar, of course. So it's a pleasure to meet you, to speak with you. Before we get into all the great stuff that you're working on today, why don't you give us a background into, where you came from, everything that led to what you're doing today?
I have lived in Israel for around 18 years. I grew up in Chicago, as you pointed out from my strong Midwest accent. And I always say that my life now is everything I never dreamed of. When I was younger, I dreamed of being a veterinarian and envisioned living in America. And after working with my father, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein of blessed memory, for 15 years, when he suddenly passed away, I automatically came into the position of president and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. I was voted president-elect by our board of directors 2 years before my father passed away. So for the past 3+ years, I've been overseeing the organization and just honored, humbled for all the amazing work that we do and people that we're able to help.
Your organization is rumored to bring hundreds of millions of dollars a year to Israel. What do you do with the money?
It's a great question. And I love the way that you said that we're rumored to bring. We're registered, of course, nonprofit in America. Everything is completely accessible online. This year, thank God, we are raising around $250 million, mostly from Christians, Christian Zionists around the world. We have around 625,000 donors whose average gift is around $70 a month. So we're kind of this grassroots model of lots of people coming together in order to make a big impact. So the 3 areas that we operate in haven't changed since my father established the organization 40 years ago. It's Aliyah and Klita. It used to be non-Western countries. It really started as former Soviet Union, Russia. And as I'd say anti-Semitism has increased over the years, we've added many countries. We now facilitate Aliyah from over 30 countries. So from France, from across the Arab world, of course, from Ukraine and all the different former Soviet Union countries, from places like Morocco and Turkey, wherever you'll find Jews, you'll find basically now it's everywhere except for America and Canada. But we also gave the first grant to start Nefesh B'Nefesh, so we're kind of there in in America as well, or we were. So Aliyah and Klita and Bitachon, security. We've built over 5,500 bomb shelters across Israel. Whenever there's a security need of securing the hospital, for example, Barzilai, that's down south, has been hit with rockets during wars. We've built a shelter over the NICU and labor and delivery unit so that women in labor, babies don't have to be moved but can stay in a secure location. And of course, the third kind of pillar of our work is Oni, is poverty. So in Israel and across former Soviet Union, we've helped over 2 million people annually this year, with basic needs like food, medicine, heat in the winter, just going back to those basics that unfortunately so many people aren't able to afford themselves.
You mentioned your father who started the organization. I know you were incredibly close to him. What are some of the things that have stayed consistent as you've transitioned to run the organization? And what are some of the things that you've brought, sort of new flavors, new ideas, some of the evolutions that have maybe been different than how your father ran the organization?
It's a really great question, Josh. And it's something that I think about often. I think a lot of times as we Whether it's kind of leaving your parents' house and starting your own home or having your own children, you take with you so much of your roots, of what formed you into who you are. And then you also have to realize those places that you want to do things a little bit differently. So it was very similar in working with my father. I always say I learned everything from him. He was a visionary. He was a believer in miracles, kind of things that people said were impossible. He said, nothing's impossible. If we have a good team, if we're committed, if we're doing the right thing, then we'll be able to achieve our goals. And so just that belief in the ability to achieve the unachievable is something that's always stayed with me, that there's no such thing as we can't. If there's a need, if there's people suffering specifically in that area, then we could create programs in order to meet that need. And it's on us to do that. His personal connection with God and with spirituality was something that continues to inspire me so deeply to this day. I would always say most people have an easier time connecting with people than they do with God, who you can't see face to face. You can't necessarily have a two-way conversation with. And it's sometimes hard. You pray and you are praying, but kind of to feel God in your heart is already a whole another level, speaking as a woman who prays, an Orthodox Jew, obviously, who has a relationship with God. But I've never seen anyone have a relationship with God the way my father did. He had a little bit of a harder time with people, but his relationship with God was something that I always go back to, just how important that is as you're achieving so much and thank God getting so much positive recognition. It's that place of humbleness and I guess, truth of it doesn't matter what the world says, both for good and for bad. You always have to use it to check yourself. But ultimately, it's between you and God. Are you doing the right thing or are you not? And it's in a way that simple. Of course, his administrative capabilities of building the fellowship was something that was literally unprecedented. And in the 15 years I worked with my father, there were many times where I said, but I think we should change X, Y, and Z, or I think we should transform to this model. He ran the organization. We were raising around $110 million a year, and he still ran the organization like mom and pop shop. Like, I think it's time to transform into a different model. And so there were so many times where I would express that to my father, and he would look at me and say, "Elle, you're 100% right, but now isn't the time." And so when he died and I, assumed this position of president and CEO of the fellowship, I really looked at it as all those times I said, Abba, we should do X, Y, and Z. And he said, you're right, but now isn't the time, that this was the right time in order to implement those changes. So I think because of many of those changes, while still holding the roots of what the fellowship stands for and the vision of my father, we've been able to not only sustain where we were, but to grow by double, thank God, both in donations and impact. A number of people helped in the past 2 years. That was a really long answer to your question, Josh. Sorry about that.
No, that's amazing. In fact, you at the end, you answered my follow-up question, which is, what are some of the things that you realized or that you started doing upon his unfortunate passing? I want to ask you a question about Christian Zionists, because I believe that they get either a bad rap or a weird rap in sort of the Jewish world. We know that they exist. We know that there are a lot of them. We know that they're all over the world. But what are like some of the main misconceptions that you think most people get wrong about this group of people?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. A lot of people kind of assume that I was born and bred in this role, or even if it wasn't in this role, at least kind of raised with this concept of Christian Zionists and, Jewish Christian relations. And the truth is I wasn't. My father, when I was young, when I was being raised, the fellowship was still so controversial. And my father was an Orthodox rabbi with smicha from Rav Soloveitchik, and he was in many ways ostracized from our Orthodox community. He was even taken to the Beit Din and threatened to be put in cherem. He would study every morning before he went to work, and he was kicked out of his study group. And so he really made a decision that he wouldn't bring that controversy home. So I wasn't raised in my childhood with this concept mainstream of Jewish-Christian relations. We didn't really know what my father did for a living. We're three girls. And when my oldest sister, Tamar, studied at Stern College. And when she had to do her final paper, she wanted to do it on my father's organization. So she arranged a call with our long-term COO at that point, George Mamo. And she said, okay, George, first question, what's the name of the organization? So we really had no clue what my father did. So the whole idea of Christian Zionists and Christians who love Israel is something that I really discovered as an adult after I was married when I started working with the fellowship. And that's what made me want to be part of this organization. My father would always say, Elle, you're going to go to law school. I'd say, no, I want to work with the fellowship. He'd say, no, you're going to go to law school. No, I want to work with the fellowship. And the reason why I want to work with the fellowship so bad was because I heard from directly these Christians who stand with Israel. And it was something that inspired me. And so that leads to your question of why do they love Israel? Or I like more the way you framed it. What are some ideas that the Jewish community have about Christian Zionists? And is it correct or not? And I think one of the most brilliant things that my father did with the fellowship was he said, okay, in order to build real trust, communication between the Jewish and Christian communities and strategic partners for the Jewish community that we've never had before. We've never had friends. We've never had millions of people who stand with us. In order to do that, we need to set some ground rules. And so one of the things that he said was, of course, number one, no evangelizing, etc. But number two is no dealing with any politics. We deal with one thing, one core issue that unites us, and that's a love for Israel, period. We don't get involved in even the politics around Israel. Our donors call and say, who should we vote for in the American elections? Who's best for Israel? And we don't give an answer. So I think that that's really important to realize for the American Jewish community who have all these maybe disagreements on lots of issues with the Christian community as far as American politics. The fellowship and the strength of this bond that we've been able to create is based on this core principle that we stand with Israel. Jews and Christians stand with Israel, period. We don't get involved in abortion or taxes or immigration or any other issues. We stand with Israel. And so I think, first of all, once you could recognize what we are standing for, you could realize what we're not standing for. We're not standing on any of these other issues. We're finding a common link, a common point, and doing everything we can to strengthen that. So that's number one. Number two is there are people who legitimately fear Christians will try to convert Jews, that they will be evangelizing to the Jewish community. I think that fear has kind of melted away a bit, because in the beginning, when my father was starting the organization, that was again, legitimate fear. The only thing the Jewish community knew is what they read in the history books. And it was my father's word of, this is a red line and it will never happen in this organization or between, donors, recipients, anything like that. It was my father's word. Now we have 40 years of kind of, the proof is in the pudding, if you will. There hasn't obviously been one example or situation of evangelizing both our donors, and everyone knows that that's not what we do, that it's not what we would allow. And so I think this really proves that which leads to my third point, that the motivation to stand with Israel and support Israel isn't about Jews converting. If that was the motivation, they wouldn't be sponsoring the fellowship. They would be sponsoring one of the many other organizations, unfortunately, who do evangelize, who do go out and have that as their mission. The fact that we're the largest philanthropic organization in Israel with over 600,000 donors, I think shows that what the Christian community really wants to do is to express their love and support for Israel and the Jewish people without having an ulterior motive. And that's kind of what the fellowship gives over. And the last one is that I think you'll hear people say the only reason why they support Israel is because they want the apocalypse to come, or, the end of days. And what my father would always say is, let's get there. Both Jews and Christians are waiting for Mashiach, waiting for the Messiah, waiting for the end of days. Let's get there and then we can see what happens. But it's not something that it's not a motivating factor for our donors, which leads to, if I have one more second, what is the motivating factor for Christians who love Israel? And it's really pretty simple. It comes down to two main things that every Christian Zionist will be able to quote. Number one, Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel. It's as simple as that. They want to be part of blessings. God tells them, you should do this and you'll get blessings. So that's what they want to do in order to make God happy and tap into, these blessings that are promised. And the second thing is being part of biblical prophecy coming to fruition. Our prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, of the Jewish people coming home to Israel, that they saw the Holocaust, they saw the exile of the Jewish people, and they recognize as people of faith, reading from the Torah, from the prophets of the Old Testament, that this is something that was foreseen thousands of years ago. And as Christians, to be able to play a small part, they feel very blessed.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm wondering, because I love what you said about building strategic partnerships for the Jewish community. I don't think we do that enough. And one of the things that I've kind of made a point in my life to do is, we build technology products. We have a streaming platform, Izzy, and we pride ourselves on building the same product that can appeal both to Jews and non-Jews. And we estimate that at Izzy, we have about 30 to 50% of our subscribers are non-Jewish. Some are sort of, those in the Christian Zionist community, but some are just people that are generally interested in Israel. And I'm just wondering, why do you think the Jewish community hasn't been so good or effective at building strategic partnerships? And what are some of the things that other organizations can learn from your organization about actually doing that in an effective and promising way?
It's two really important questions, I think, for the future of Israel and the Jewish people. And it's amazing what you're doing with Izzy, and understanding also both as far as giving opportunity for people to be engaged and learn and have access to the important work that you're doing and technology that you're building. And second of all, recognizing the importance of investing in a strategic partnership for Israel, for the world. I believe it's not one-sided, it's two-sided. It's a relationship, it's a friendship. So I think that there are two sides, I would say. One side is this reality that many people are reaching out to the Christian community, which is wonderful. When my father died and I was sitting Shiva, and there was someone there, a mayor of one of the cities, who said, Yael, do you think the fellowship is going to make it? Because when your father started the organization, he didn't have any competition. And now you have a lot of competition. He was the only Jewish Christian organization back then. And now every organization is focused on Jewish Christian relations, both as far as already existent organizations that have a separate focus or, target market of the Christian community for the organization, or new organizations that have been established that are working on this. And I looked at them and I said, are you kidding? That's not called competition. That's called, the realization of my father's dream, that he didn't want to have a monopoly on this. He wanted this to be a mainstream concept, that the Jewish community and the Christian community are connected in strategic partnership and friendship and helping one another and making our world better and stronger in these Judeo-Christian values, etc. And so I think there's the positive sign that we are seeing significant growth in this area, in a field where it was non-existent, Jewish Christian relations, and it was even taboo and frowned upon. Suddenly now it's something that's celebrated and everyone's trying to get their foot in the door. So that's one side. The other side, though, Josh, that I have to express here is it also is sometimes a little bit discouraging to me, because I guess I don't want the Jewish community looking at the Christian community with dollar signs and trying to take advantage of them. I think there's a big difference between building strategic partnerships and trying to take advantage of them. And that's where I guess the second part of your question of what could different companies, organizations, people, publications do in order to further this important strategic partnership of Jewish Christian relations, or Christians that stand with Israel. And I would answer really simply, learn about it and be authentic. Don't look at them as we say in Hebrew, as freilim, like if taking advantage of them, like, oh, if I say I'm from Israel, they'll do anything to help me. It's not like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen more growth, why we haven't seen more progress in the area of Jewish-Christian relations. There are so many people invested in this, focusing on it. But I think for a lot of people, they're not taking the time to really learn about it, really appreciate what this strategic partnership is outside of one-sided, but really that's two-sided. And as soon as we see more organizations, more companies like yours, really understanding it, caring about it, investing in it beyond just, I'm from Israel, Christians should help me, I think we'll be able to see a lot more growth in this really important field.
I want to get back to sort of the personas and the maybe so-called consumer psychology of this group of people that you've built tremendous relationships with, both interpersonal and at scale. Are you seeing that they're mainly interested in sort of the stigmatic things in Israel, like Nazareth, or things dealing with Jesus, or things dealing with religion? Or are you also seeing that they're interested in what we might call modern day Israel, which could be things like Tel Aviv or the Negev, or even parts of Jerusalem that have been modernized over the years? Like, what are you seeing on the ground?
Wow, that's such a full question. And I could tell you what I'm seeing from my experience. I think that there are a few different kinds of people, right? There are those Christians who are, for example, coming to Israel for the first time, who want to go, Israel Ministry of Tourism. My father actually worked with them on it back in the 80s. Worked on a Jesus path, right? Where you could follow kind of the footsteps of Jesus and go to all the Christian sites. So I think that's naturally the first step for Christians who are coming to Israel for the first time. But what I see is the second time already, they don't want to do that. What they want to learn about is Israel. And I think it's so important because a lot of times different people for the government or different people in different areas ask for my suggestions and advice of how to engage and kind of make excited the Christian community about Israel. And what I always say is it's not about what was, it's about what is. That it's there, of course, the roots of the Christian support and excitement for Israel is based on what was here, but it's no less exciting of what's happening today. We're living in amazing times. And actually, the chairman of our board, Bishop Paul Lanier, he was one of our donors. He still is, of course, but then he moved to be part of the board of directors. My father asked him to join as our America board of directors. I asked him to be chairman of the board. And what he always says is two things. First of all, I want to go to Israel and I want to lay on the ground in Shiloh and I want to go and have a falafel in Tel Aviv. And yeah, I'll stop off in the Garden of Gethsemane, but I want to go to the Kotel. I want to go to the Kotel and pray. And so when I hear as a Christian, the head of a huge church, that he is so engaged, of course, with what was, not in any way, God forbid, belittling that or putting any less emphasis on it, but also just so focused on what is. It's something that's so inspiring to me. And whenever I speak to him also as chairman of the board and as a donor, he always, and I say, what could I do better? What could we plan for? He always says, Yael, if there were ever, we need to make sure the head of this organization is always Jewish, is always a practicing Jew, because I could give to other organizations where Christians are leading it. I'm giving to the Jewish people, and I want it to go directly to the needs in Israel that you, as an Israeli, as a Jewish person, know where they are and could relate to them in that way. So I think your question is so relevant, not only for tourism, not only for business, but for everyone who's living in Israel and trying to understand. I mean, there's around 4 million tourists who come to Israel annually, and around 2.1 million of them, so over half of them, are Christian, that it affects all of us in all of the different industries in Israel and in every single way of life. And I even have a friend who started a business reaching out actually to Christians in the business world. And he's always like kind of showing them all the different things, quotes from New Testament, quotes from kind of all the different Christian theological books and different Christian sites in Israel and putting up pictures of crosses. And I called him and I said, listen, I really want your business to succeed. So the only advice I could give you is the reason why Christians want to stand with Israel and learn from the Jewish people is also so that they could discover the roots of their faith. You don't need to tell them the quotes from the New Testament. They know that. They don't need you for that. You don't need to be sending, pictures of crosses from Israel. They have that wherever they live in America. What they want to see is, what are the Jewish roots of their faith? Or you could say differently, how did Jesus live as a Jew? What is the Old Testament that the Jewish people have kept so sacred and kept those traditions alive that have been lost in the Christian community? I think that that's something that's very often lost, and goes back to your question of what's happening in Tel Aviv. We know what happened in Nazareth in the sense of integrating and recognizing the place. I'm Jewish, you're Christian. How can we work together? And it's not just mirroring one or the other.
Yeah, I love that. Talk to me a little bit about the business side, because I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people know about the tourism, they know about the philanthropy, but talk to me about the business side. What can you share on that side of things?
The business side isn't exactly my area of focus. I mean, we moved in a large way to running the fellowship in a way you could say like a business. We integrated data and KPIs, and it's one of the things that led to significant growth of the fellowship. And so in doing that, I worked with also a lot of businesses who have gone through a similar process. And what I can say is, the Christian community who stands with Israel wants to be connected to Israel in all different ways, whether it's tourism, whether it's philanthropy, whether it's politics, whether it's business. And so there are many businesses who are very successful at targeting Christian, both individuals and leading business people, men and women in America and around the world, as far as investing in Israel. And I think that's when it kind of brings us back in Israel to recognize this isn't just another business that we're establishing. We're establishing a business in Israel. What's the relevance for the kind of holiness of this land, if you will?
That's amazing. I want to get to your books. I understand you've written 3 books, all very different, which I think is amazing. If I were to ask you, okay, I have time to read one of those books right now, which one would you, I know they're all like your kids probably, but which one would you single out and say, read all of them, but start with this one?
I think the most recent book that was published around 3 years ago, Generation to Generation, is a book that for me personally is meaningful. It was actually published after my father died. I wrote it right after my father died. And one of the things that Christians ask me often, and Jews actually, is how have the Jewish people passed on their faith through so many, not only through so many generations, but so many generations of exile. And it's something that, especially in our world, which is full of assimilation on every front, in every religion, I think is one of the biggest fears. I have 4 children, thank God, is one of the biggest fears of every parent who is faithful. No matter what religion you are, you want your children to continue that. And so the book, Generation to Generation, which I wrote, which is relevant both for Christians and Jews, documents for me how I take and how I was brought up in a home that took the Jewish biblical holidays as an expression of how we can continue passing on faith to our children. I think the Jewish holidays all represent a different component of life, or a different emotion that is so critical, whether it's, we just passed Tisha B'Av, the place of mourning and recognizing the brokenness that we came from and the pain that our people have endured, or the idea of redemption and believing in redemption when we focus on Pesach, on Passover, or the idea of miracles when you focus on Hanukkah and how the few can overcome the great if you're focused on truth and what you believe in and you have conviction. And of course, the weekly Shabbats that I think are the most important part of preserving Judaism and faith and passing it on to the next generation. As Rabbi Heschel said, even more than the Jews have kept the Shabbat has kept the Jews. And I don't think it's ever been more relevant than our generation. So yeah, in my book, Generation to Generation, passing on a legacy of faith to the next generation. For me personally, and also what I see in the world, what I think is really important. I think that's the one book that I would want people to read.
I appreciate that. You know, you really strike me as sort of this hybrid of a tremendous philanthropist and really an entrepreneur, maybe a social entrepreneur of sorts. And so I believe that you have a remarkable vision for the fellowship. And I'm just curious to hear from you, you know, 5 to 10 years out, where do you want to take this thing?
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to breathe, try to get over the anxiety attack that you just, you know, it's a great question, Josh. And the truth is I don't have an answer. I started off putting stamps on envelopes at the fellowship 18 years ago. My father wanted me to go to law school. And I said, I want to work for the fellowship. And he said, okay, you'll work for the fellowship for minimum wage, putting stamps on envelopes until you remember you want to go to law school. And it was then that I started really just, okay, fine. I don't care. I have my degrees. I know I'm capable of them more than this, but if this is where I'm supposed to be right now, putting stamps on envelopes, I'll accept it. I take it and I'll do it with all my heart. And my prayer has always been kind of, let me be a channel of whatever goodness and blessings I'm able to bring to the world to help others and do what I'm supposed to do here. Let me just be present in that. And so that was my prayer, my personal prayer when I was putting stamps on envelopes. And then when I, moved up to, I think, 7 different positions within the fellowship, slowly moving up until I came here to be president and CEO. And when my father died, I had the exact same prayer. According to I'm someone who really believes in data and analytics and statistics. And I believe that we could go above that, but it's still important to know what the odds are. And all the data showed when my father suddenly passed away, first generation, suddenly transitioning to next generation. And in a faith-based world where I'm not only not a rabbi, but I'm not a man and I'm young. And I had so many things against me that even taking out all those components, second generation nonprofits, within the first 5 years, statistically drop around 70% if they're still open 5 years later, that I knew I was fighting against all odds in order to keep the fellowship, forget about strong, alive. And my prayer during that time was the same prayer, like use me however I can be used. And I promise I will do my best. I will do the best in my ability to keep this organization alive, continue to help people with the basics that they so desperately need. But it's not in my hands, it's in God's hands. And every step, I think what makes the fellowship really special and unique is that we are so focused. We have strategic plans, we have work plans, we have every single piece of data and analytics. Every one of our staff members, every department has their very clear goals and KPIs and deliverables that are reassessed every quarter. And so we're so focused, but we're also so agile. So as soon as COVID struck, we were the first ones within the first closure with 2 days notice to be bringing thousands of elderly food to their homes. When the war in Ukraine broke out just a few months ago, I was on the ground in Kiev 4 days before the war began. We had the last Aliyah flight out of Kiev to Israel and the first Aliyah flight after the war began 2 days later to Israel with refugees. We had our operation set up in Chisinau in Moldova within a day of the war breaking out. The airspace was closed. We got special humanitarian aid permission to fly aid into Moldova, unload the aid for the Jewish community in Ukraine, load the airplane with New Olim to Israel and fly it to Israel. You look on the radar, we're the only airplane in the entire region because airspace was closed. So I think I have my goals for the next 3 years, 5 years, even if we could sustain what we're doing now of raising $250 million for Israel and the Jewish people around the world, Daenu, to be able to sustain that, I'll be happy. But I think every step along the way is knowing I'm doing my best, my team is doing the best, and leaving whatever will be in God's hands.
You mentioned something there that I found quite interesting, which is sort of being a female in a male-dominated space. I think, religion historically has been obviously male-dominated. I think one of the good things about the modern world, specifically in the Jewish world, has been the rise of female leaders. We know we've had female leaders in the past, but they're quite few and far between compared to, again, the male dominance. What can you share on the front of being a female leader and still what I would call a male dominated space that other existing female leaders can learn from, and ones that maybe are not sure if they can succeed? What would you say to them as well, the sort of the next generation of female leaders in the Jewish world and in the charitable world as well?
So I've been asked this question before, and the truth is, I don't feel like I'm so equipped to answer it because I was raised in a family of 3 girls, 3 daughters, and we were never told as women you could do anything. It was just kind of a given. And so I feel like even by saying as women you can do anything, you're still creating this kind of subconscious voice of, oh, why wouldn't I be able to? Okay, I guess I should question that. And I feel like that's a big part of what's empowered me as a woman to not even look at myself as a woman as being a challenge, but rather it's you work hard, you earn your place, you earn your legitimacy, you make an impact, you'll be recognized for it. In a way, naivety has served me well because I haven't created any barriers for myself. But that's not to say that barriers don't exist. Barriers do exist and they are real. So it's not to undermine that. I just don't feel like I'm best equipped to answer that question. But I think that for me, what's been really important is keeping my core values, my family, of course, my amazing husband and my 4 children, and keeping my core values really strong while still going out and trying to change the world. There's one of my favorite books is The Alchemist, and I've read it maybe like 25,000 times. And it always stands out to me, the story that the king tells the boy that he gives him a spoon with 2 drops of oil. And he says, go around and explore the palace, but don't let the 2 drops of oil spill. And the boy goes out and explores the palace and comes back and is like, okay, there's still 2 drops of oil on the spoon. And the king says, yeah, what did you see in the palace? And the truth is I didn't see anything. I was so focused on not letting the drops fall. He said, okay, go out and explore the palace again. Now actually look up. And for me, that's kind of like a mashal, an allegory for life, in the sense of you have to hold those 2 drops of oil and not let them spill. I think especially as a woman, but I think it's just as relevant for men. Have those core values, have your family, have those 2 drops of oil that no matter what, you are not letting spill. But also go out and explore the palace, look around, don't close your eyes to the suffering, to the needs, to the opportunities. And I think when you're able to hold that balance, or sometimes for many it's kind of even a contradiction, which is very hard, but I think the more you're able to hold that balance, the more you're able to really succeed internally, externally, at home, in the world, because I don't think just making an impact and succeeding outside of the world, if you're a miserable person, is doing many people a favor.
I love that. I love the humility, but also as you were building out that answer, it felt like actually you are quite able and capable of answering that question. So I appreciate that. And I think humility is, by the way, one of what I've been told is a core leadership trait. So I think that's amazing. Talk to me a little bit about Israelis specifically, born and bred Israelis, right? Who probably don't have that much exposure to Christian Zionists. I believe your husband is Israeli, born and bred, if I'm not mistaken. So, from through his eyes and through, other Israelis that I know are in your circle, What are some of the reactions that you get from them? And what are some of the things that you would like more Israelis to understand about this very supportive community?
Wow, I think that's the first time I've ever gotten that question. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Israel, on one hand, is so diverse and eclectic in the sense that everyone here are immigrants from all over the world. So everyone's in a way been exposed to everything. And on the other hand, we're so insular and kind of only exposed to our bubble of what we're exposed to. And as my husband always reminds me, we live in the Middle East. However progressive and modern and democratic it feels, sometimes you're reminded, like at the bank, like you are in the Middle East. So I think that Christian Zionism is a concept that people I think relate to differently. I think it's also definitely changed in the past 18 years even that I've been involved in it. I think in the beginning, when my father moved to Israel in the year 2000, and that's when he really started talking about Christian Zionism and Christian support for Israel. And he got a lot of different responses, from literally death threats that were stuck on his house, on his block, on the office, from more religious Haredi community, who really looked at this as a threat of evangelizing, trying to convert. They didn't understand the concept of Christian Zionists and a rabbi leading this without trying to convert. All they knew were kind of, again, what they've read in the history books, which is legitimate. And then the second part were people who kind of looked at them again as friarim, okay, they like Israel, they'll give money to Israel, give me money, I'm in Israel. And it's really neither of those. And so to see where we are today is actually so inspiring and amazing. Both even within the ultra-Orthodox religious community, they're now going out and fundraising from the Christian community. And within the more professional or philanthropic or modern world, I think they're understanding more and more, also through tourism, through meeting Christians firsthand in Israel and seeing they're not these kooks that maybe they would have thought that they were. They're not these unrelatable, totally different people from us than they maybe envisioned them to be. That I think a lot of people in Israel at this point have met Christians that by having that individual one-on-one kind of conversation and experience is something that has changed them. The fellowship doesn't bring tours to Israel. We're not in the area of Christian tourism, just like we're not in the area of, politics, but it does exist and people are exposed to it. So I think the more exposure the individual gets, and it's something I believe in, not just in the area of Jewish-Christian relations, but in every area, the more you're exposed to what you think is weird or different or create all these illusions of what something or someone is, the more you face it, the more you could realize they're humans, and not only humans, but that it's authentic. I think that's the biggest thing with Christian Zionists. It's hard for the Jewish people to understand that Christian Zionism is authentic. They really, really believe it, stand behind it, would do everything for it, and it's not kooky. It's I guess it's just as kooky as anything else, in the sense of saying that Jewish people turn off their phones and TVs and, technology for 25 hours once a week is kooky as well. But when you see it, you realize that there's something special in it. So I guess the biggest thing is just seeing that it's authentic. Something that for me, I had to deal with very early on is when I would speak to Christians and they'd say, you're the chosen people. That's why we want to help you. We love you because you're the chosen people. And I'm like, I feel really uncomfortable with that. Jews don't really speak about that. That's like kind of one of the unspoken things in the Jewish community. We don't say we're the chosen people. So it forced me to kind of explore my own faith. What does this mean? Am nivchar. What does it mean, the chosen people? And the answer that I got was that I connected to so much was Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, who said, what does it mean to be the chosen people? It means that God chose us to tell the world that they're chosen. And it's so beautiful. And I feel like it's very aligned with my work, the Jewish people were privileged, blessed to receive Torah Sinai and to have the huge privilege in a world that was idol worshipers and sacrificing children, in a world that would look so foreign to us right now, to be able to take apart through telling the world that they're chosen. And what that means to me is, focusing on the 10 Commandments, where we've come as far as the Judeo-Christian values, that we've come to a world that is full of justice and democracy and freedom and equality. I think that is what it means to be the chosen people, that the Jewish people played such a pivotal we were chosen in order to change the world to where it is just a given for our generation that it is now, which is freedom.
Wow, that's a beautiful quote, by the way, and just an amazing answer. I have to say, really enlivened me inside. So thank you for that. I want to ask you a question about your kids, because we know everything starts and ends with education, especially in the Jewish world, but not only. And I'm just curious, what are some of the conversations and the questions that your kids ask you about, the organization, and about, what does mommy do at work every day? What does Ima do at work every day? What are some of those conversations, and how do you share with them what Christian Zionism is, and so on and so forth?
I love that. So it's really interesting. My kids have a very different upbringing than I did. It's not like you can't compare me and my father to my kids and me, for a few reasons. Number one, when my father was starting the organization, like we spoke about, he didn't bring it home. I wasn't exposed to it. I'm all over kind of social media, so my kids are very exposed to what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, and try to hide from the camera so that they don't end up on my Instagram feed. But my kids see it. And so I think like everything else with children, when you're authentic in something, your children see it. When you don't fully believe it, your children see that. And I think that's kind of the premise and foundation for all education, especially in passing on faith. Do you believe it? If you believe it, your kids will see that and they'll ultimately come back to it. If you don't, and you're just paying lip service or going through the motions for whatever reasons or whatever traumas, or your kids are going to want to get as far away from that as well. So I think just through this non-stressful, not putting on them kind of the mission, they have become very excited and passionate and proud of what the fellowship does. Even, when the Ukraine war broke out, and like I said, the fellowship was very, very front and center of Aliyah and bringing Jewish refugees home. In every school in Israel, they had a presentation to the kids of how to acclimate refugees from Ukraine, because they were integrating into the education system. So the Ministry of Education, together with, I believe, the Ministry of Aliyah and Kliyata, put out a video for the children of just showing where they came from and how to integrate them into the system and the classes. And Meora, my oldest daughter, she's 16, and she's like, "Mommy, the first screen was you holding a kid on the airplane, landing in Israel, a refugee with an Israeli flag." And everyone's like, "Oh, it's Meora's mom. It's Meora's mom." So I think just being exposed to it in that way. And of course, what they know is that I'm always talking to Christians, and Christians are always talking to me. And, when our board of director comes to Israel and comes to our table, half of them are Jewish and half of them are Christian. That I think that for my kids, the beautiful thing for me is twofold. Number one, it's a given. It's not a kooky idea. It's not a even radical idea. It's a given, in the sense of, yeah, Christians stand with Israel, and Israel and the Jewish people have a responsibility to respect and stand with them in return as well. And knowing red lines and knowing how to differentiate ourselves, not from anyone, from anyone, of keeping our core values when we're out in the world with people that are different. And the second part is really this idea of hakarat hatov, that they see that it's being thankful and giving recognition, that they see the Christians who stand with Israel, and then they see my kids have all lived through wars, and seeing that, wow, it's this community who's most supportive. They're on, again, social media, showing all these lies and horrible things about Israel. And then they see all of our Christian friends who are standing with Israel, supporting Israel, praying for Israel, recognizing Israel's right to self-defense. And so I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, just exposure and breaking down the scariness of the other naturally builds for everyone something different. But I think, thank God for my children, both a sense of identity of this is who we are, and knowing how to draw boundaries and borders, not only between Christians and Jews, but between kids in their class that aren't like them and they don't want to be close to, or dangerous situations on the street, or whatever it is, recognizing my space, who I am, and differentiating me from you. And number two, recognizing living in Israel is a really special thing, how millions of people around the world are just standing with us, praying for us. This is the center of the world for so many people, and they're privileged to live here. And number three, seeing how this partnership of Christians who stand with Israel and represents itself in over 2 million Jewish people being helped with food and medicine and shelter. Just what a huge and awesome movement the fellowship is.
Wow. Yeah, this has been a tremendous conversation. Thank you so much, and keep up the amazing work, really.
Thank you so much, Josh, and you as well. This was fun, and I loved all of your questions and speaking to you. So thank you so much for having me.